Evita, 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 Evita. Do you know what I feel weird about? It's a sideways program, and not only a sideways program, a program that does this rather than this. I'm holding the fold like a purse. I just feel like what's that? Oh my god, hey, welcome back to my theatre-themed YouTube channel. My name is Mickey Jo, and I am obsessed with all things theatre. If you're meeting me for the first time, I am a professional freelance theatre critic here on social media, and this is my YouTube channel where I share full, detailed reviews about the plays and musicals I have been invited to go and see, predominantly in the UK, but occasionally internationally. And today we're going to be talking about the Leicester Curve's recent revival of Evita, the Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice musical, all about the life and times of the former First Lady of Argentina. Why was I going to say the Philippines? Because I've been talking about Here Lies Love too much. Argentina. We're going to Argentina today for this one, Eva Peron. Now, December can be a very busy month for critics in the UK, and I have this recent tradition that I really like, where I try and end my theatre-going year by travelling up to the north and seeing a few regional Christmas shows, which is why I found myself at the Leicester Curve for the very last show I saw before I took a break for Christmas. This was the last thing I saw in 2023. And though I have certainly talked a lot about Andrew Lloyd Webber shows here on my channel, Evita is actually one of my favourites. I think this is a terrific show. I've always enjoyed this one, and this is a very interesting, very bold revival, not unlike the current revival of Sunset Boulevard, directed by Jamie Lloyd at the Savoy Theatre. But what is it about this production of Evita that is inviting comparisons to that production? And do I think it's as strong as a piece of theatre? Stay tuned, we're going to find out. But if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to subscribe to my theatre-themed YouTube channel for many more reviews coming very soon. You can also find me on other social media platforms. I am at MickeyJoTheatre on Instagram, TikTok, the app formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn for business inquiries. And if you have already seen this production of Evita at the Leicester Curve, comment down below with your thoughts about the show. If you've seen a previous production of Evita, if you saw the original production of Evita, my goodness, comment down below, let us know what you think about this as a musical. And also, who did you see in it? Because now I'm curious. But for now, it's time to talk about the one at the Curve. Let's talk about the Leicester Curve's revival of Evita. So Evita was a late 70s musical that began its life as a rock opera concept album, and it is all about the life of the former First Lady of Argentina, Eva Peron. A polarizing figure, she was born Eva Duarte and then became First Lady when her husband, Juan Peron, was elected president in the late 40s. At the height of her slightly unprecedented political power, she was hugely outspoken and beloved by the descamisados, who were the working class people of Argentina. She sadly passed away in the early 1950s at the age of 33, having been named spiritual leader of the nation, and upon her death was given an enormous state funeral. The entire country was in mourning, which is where the plot of the musical Evita begins. But the masterstroke of this show, a lot like Jesus Christ Superstar, which chooses to frame the final few days of Jesus' life through the eyes of Judas Iscariot, is that this doesn't allow Eva to be the narrator of her own story. Instead, we have a separate narrator character named Shay. Shay, who is loosely based on the activist Che Guevara, you may know him from t-shirts, is introduced to us as a member of the public who stands as a lone critic of Eva during this period of celebration and mourning. He sings "Oh What a Circus," in which he is somewhat baffled by the adulatory reaction to her death in light of her relatively lackluster political achievements. He says she didn't say much, but she said it loud. Following which we flash back to Eva at a much earlier age, and subsequently we follow her story, her meeting Juan Peron, her moving to Buenos Aires, her becoming First Lady of Argentina, and ultimately her death. Her rise, her downfall, the love and the criticisms alike. And much like a more recent musical, Here Lies Love, Che is a useful figure to have here because it separates us from Eva by one step, rendering her that little bit less sympathetic because her choices and her machinations are being framed by someone else who is an open skeptic of her. Now, this is definitely up there among my favourite Andrew Lloyd Webber musicals. Much like with Jesus Christ Superstar, I think the real genius of it is the lyrics of Tim Rice, but there are some fantastic Lloyd Webber tunes that we can't overlook. And just as he tends to in many of his scores, once he writes a great tune, he's going to make sure you hear it at least twice. Evidenced by the fact that the show's two most popular songs, Oh What a Circus, which became a single for David Essex, who originally played the role of Shay, and Don't Cry for Me Argentina, which was a single for Julie Covington on the concept album, and then a big song for Elaine Paige, who played the role in London, Patti LuPone, Madonna in the film. Those two, if you hadn't already realised, are in fact the same song. Eva sings, "It won't be easy, you'll think it's strange," while Shay sings, "Oh what a circus, oh what a show. You let down your people, Evita. Don't cry for me, Argentina." It's the same song, it's literally the same song. And just about every other melody that we hear in this score gets reprised, but it is also a great score. Buenos Aires is a thrilling number, Rainbow High is a great number. An interesting side note here is that when this was adapted to film starring Madonna, they added a song called You Must Love Me. This is the only song ever added to a musical movie in history to actually win the Academy Award for Best Original Song, following which they added it into the stage production. Now, I think this is a great song, but I don't like it in the context of this show, and I'm going to tell you why. My issue is that this comes immediately after a song called Waltz for Eva and Shay, which kind of closes the book on her story very neatly. It's this dreamlike sequence where she is openly debating back and forth with Che about what she's achieved and what she ought to have done given her privileges and given her power. It's the first time that the two of them really directly address each other in the show, and it's kind of the crux of the whole thing. But following that, when she sings You Must Love Me to Peron, it's the only song that really colours her with an overt sympathy and kind of asks the audience to sympathise and feel sorry for her. Now, like I mentioned, a controversial and polarising political figure for many reasons, and throughout the show, when she sings Don't Cry For Me Argentina, when we go from High Flying Adored into Rainbow High, you're weighing whether or not you really believe the conviction of what she's saying and how much of it is a pretense and political spin. You Must Love Me, by comparison, feels a lot more like emotional blackmail. If they were going to add a song from the film into the stage show, I wish it was The Lady's Got Potential. This is a valuable expositional song about the political landscape, about where Juan Perón comes from prior to him meeting Eva. I think the show would benefit from this because it provides us a little bit of historical context that is otherwise missing. It also slaps. The lady's got potential, she was setting her sights. In fact, this song was on the concept album but got cut from the show in favour of the more mysterious and ambiguous The Art of the Possible, which is also not nearly as exciting. So that tells you a little bit more about Evita. Let's talk about why this production at the Curve is a little bit different. So like with many shows whose original production was helmed by the incredible director Hal Prince, subsequent productions and creative teams have struggled to create something that will stand up to that original version. We have had various attempts at Evita through the years. Jamie Lloyd directed a production for Regent's Park Open Air Theatre just before the pandemic, which was very bold and featured a lot of colourful smoke and Eva crawling around the stage in a white slip. But this revival from Curve artistic director Nikolai Foster also shares similarities with Jamie Lloyd's Sunset Boulevard. Let me tell you why. So both productions have this very stripped back aesthetic. This is not new for the Curve. They have this hugely expansive playing space that, when not filled with scenery, gives them sort of boundless possibilities in terms of the staging. This is how they did Billy Elliot. This is how they did A Chorus Line. I do like when there is a set at Curve, but they have such a sense of immense scale when they pull all of those set pieces out and it's just exposed into the wings, like Sunset Boulevard. The costuming is not exclusively black and white, but they are wearing more minimal modern outfits. We are not being specific to the time period during which this is set. We are also not really attempting accents. Now, this has definitely been a point of contention, and this production was invoked in an article which was written about shows that were failing to represent different cultures and different global communities because there is not Argentinian, Latinx or South American representation within this cast. And as soon as the singing begins, it becomes apparent that they are doing this with very clipped British accents. Argentina has gone to town over the death of an actress called Eva Peron. That's what we're doing. Also, very few set pieces. Occasionally they will bring in things like curtains. There is this one very large bridge that lowers down, a little like Wicked, a little like the current Broadway revival of Sweeney Todd. There's this set of stairs that gets brought on that connects to the bridge because Eva Peron can't possibly sing Don't Cry For Me Argentina without being elevated and usually standing at the top of some stairs. But perhaps the most obvious similarity is that once again we are using cameras and screens on stage. There is a vertical screen that lowers down at the back left-hand side of the stage while action is playing out in front of it. It's less like Sunset Boulevard, where it really directs your attention to it, and more like an additional feature of the backdrop. But it is showing footage, some of which, but not all of which, is being captured live via cameras held on stage, which is used to varying effect in the first and second act. We're going to get to that. The set design is by Michael Taylor, the costume design by Ed Lindley. Adam Fisher did the sound, Joshie Harriott did the lighting, and always stunning lighting design at the Curve. It's a space that has tremendous capability for great lighting design. Very, very powerful. What they lack in sets, they will usually make up for with the intensity of the lighting. Ben Van Tienen was the musical director and Stephen Brooker was the musical supervisor, and I will say that the score sounded fantastic and lush and full, and there are some really triumphant moments within this score, some fantastic orchestral sweeps when we first hear da 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 ba 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 ba. It's one of those moments where the music really has the capability to punch you, and Curve know absolutely how to couple that with a strong visual on stage, a powerful lighting moment, and you feel this awe-inspiring effect of all of that hitting you at the same time. Then the show carries on, the weight of that moment gradually begins to fade, and you lose a little bit of the impact. Let me tell you about why. So like with Jamie Lloyd's Sunset Boulevard, there is a lot of cleverness in this revival, and there are a lot of innovative and interesting moments. Shay beginning as a member of the audience, beginning to sing Oh What a Circus from the front row of the stalls while holding a program, literally puts him among us, makes him just one other spectator to the story and to the life of Eva Peron before he goes on stage to join in and continue narrating it, having been one of the people, one of the audience. There's a cleverness to that. There are various political moments during, I believe, Don't Cry For Me Argentina, as well as A New Argentina. We have members of the company standing in the auditorium, again amongst the audience. We can hear them singing from behind us. We feel included. And to its credit, and to the credit of director Nikolai Foster and choreographer Adam Murray, this is a show that fills a vast space very well and very effectively. It doesn't feel swallowed by this enormous stage or this auditorium. It explodes out of it and spills into the audience. The problem I have is that not every choice that has been made with the show feels infused with the same kind of meaning and attention to detail. And since the camera work is sort of the primary gimmick of this show, I want to talk about that first. So in the first act, I really liked the use of camera because it was used specifically in a way that seemed to convey the public persona of Eva Peron. The camera was used to show her giving these sort of public statements, and everything that was filmed and displayed on the big screen at the back was everything that was being publicly shown. It allowed for the separation of the woman that she truly was and the image that she was trying to cultivate. In the second act, however, we began to lose that a little bit because the camera and the screen were overused. And were this production to have arrived prior to Sunset Boulevard opening at the Savoy, and by the way, I don't think there's any creative plagiarism going on here because both of these shows take a very long time to develop and they would have been working on these creative ideas for a long time, but were Evita to have come first, I might not have such a high standard for the cinematography of it all and the use of those cameras and those screens. But where you have a song like High Flying Adored, where Tyrone Huntley is just wandering around singing the song on an empty stage while we show these pre-recorded stock footage moments of Martha Kirby as Ava just posing in a pretty dress, looking glamorous like she's in a L'Oreal ad, that is a slightly less creative choice. Then on the heels of that, we have Rainbow High, a fantastic number where Ava's demeanour immediately pivots. You know, she's being very gracious in High Flying Adore. She's saying, I'm just an ordinary person who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Rainbow High begins and she's saying, I have to be fabulous, I have to be perfect, this is everything I am demanding. She is becoming this political diva. But that is also filmed and shown on the big screen with the ensemble holding mirrors. We don't get this sense of visual transformation. It's a makeover song and we don't really get any kind of a makeover. We get some clever cinematography because it films her face in a mirror showing her face and then it pans from that to her real face, and that suggests a duality. But what we've lost completely is the sense of the camera and the screen depicting her as she is publicly perceived, because we're seeing behind the scenes here with seemingly no difference. At this point now, the camera and the screen don't mean anything anymore, and that's disappointing. Oh my god, hey, Mickey Jo here. Obviously. Little thing I need to add in. I'm editing this video right now and I need to add in one more thing because I got so passionate about this, I guess, that I completely failed to get to the point I was trying to make. While we are talking about the two different uses of onstage cameras and video screens, I need to explain the fundamental difference between the Sunset Boulevard one and the Evita one. So in Sunset Boulevard, it's this enormous, wide, a horizontal screen, right? Which invokes what? Cinema, Hollywood, film, everything that resonates with the themes of the show. It's being narrated by Joe, who is a screenwriter, so he's reconceiving the entire story as a Hollywood film. With Evita, it's this small portrait screen. I don't know if it's actually 9:16, but it kind of looks like it is. It's a vertical screen in the back corner, which does not invoke cinema. What does that invoke? It invokes TikTok, it invokes Instagram Reels, and the idea that comes with that is this connotation of Eva Peron as an influencer. This whole idea of like, if she was around today, she'd be an influencer. And while that may be true, I don't like it any more in Evita than I did in 101 Dalmatians when they tried to make Cruella de Vil a social commentator and called it an influencer. I think even if it's true, it's just super facile as a comparison, and my response to that is always, and what? Like, even if you are comparing her to an influencer, what does that say? What statement are you making about what does that tell us? What can we gain from that? I don't know that that's at all interesting, and I think it's just a really reductive way of framing a genuinely interesting historical figure. That's my issue with the comparative uses of screens and cameras. Back to the rest of the review. It's the difference between a direction like Jamie Lloyd's, where to the smallest detail, everything is planned and conceived in service of the themes and the characters and the text, and a direction where you're just looking for exciting things to do and you're just throwing things at the wall to saying, oh, at this point we could have that in the audience and we can do this with a camera because we have a camera on stage and we can put more lighting cues in here and we can use the steps here, but it doesn't necessarily feel attached to a deeper meaning. It feels divorced from the text at that point. Which is not to say that some of those moments aren't really striking. There's a brilliant visual of this bridge lowering and the critics of Eva and her husband getting crushed beneath it, a visual which evokes the famous 1930s socialist statue called Worker and Kolkhoz Woman. There's also a trap in the middle of the stage that goes up and down on a hydraulic lift, which occasionally raises up to allow people to crawl out from under the stage level. There's a young ensemble which do this at one point while they are singing to Eva. They are occasionally utilised in the show, but there are more moments where they feel shoehorned into the production than they feel genuinely useful. Apologies to the young performers who of course do a great job on that stage. I just don't know if it needs them in this production other than to fill this vast space. There are also a few moments of odd characterization within the ensemble. There's a song called Rainbow Tour in which Eva is being alternately praised and criticised while on a world tour where she's meeting with various different political and religious leaders. And from a storytelling perspective, we don't get a strong sense of who the critics are among the group assembled on stage because the same people seem to alternately praise and criticise. We don't get a sense of the different factions within that political party. Before the end of the first act, there's a song called Peron's Latest Flame, where we hear from the well-to-do ladies in society who are openly critical towards Eva, as well as the men of the military who are critical towards her for different reasons. And the men are portrayed with a masculine aggression and sincerity, and the society ladies are kind of haughty spoofs, despite representing a legitimate historical class element, which is important to the story. I have one more puzzling choice in this production and one more teensy criticism of the material, and then we're going to move on. There is a cut line after Eva and Peron meet for the first time, and they sing what's the song called? It's fallen out of my head. I'd be surprisingly good for you. That's what they sing. And she goes home with Peron, where she meets his mistress, and she sings hello and goodbye, I've just unemployed you. And previously, she would say to the mistress, who has nothing to say to her, I like your conversation, you're a snappy turn of phrase, before turning to Peron and saying you're obviously going through some adolescent phase, making a point about how uncomfortably young his mistress is. And they cut that line from this production. Perhaps that's been cut previously and I'm misremembering here, but it feels like a moment where they've taken the bite out of it, or they want to portray him with a little more sensitivity. I don't know. Then my one little bugbear with this material, and like I said, I like this show, but it does have one of the weirdest endings known to man. There are so many false endings with these grand songs that could finish the show, and then we finish on this little bit of dialogue where they talk about an actual historical fact and oddity, but they do not explain it. They talk about how after she died, there was an outpouring of love and her body was embalmed and publicly displayed so that people could see it. And then they say, and then she went missing for years. They say the number of years. And then that's it. That's the end of the show. It's the weirdest ending because that's such an interesting story. And you all immediately go, why? What happened? Where was she found? And they just don't tell you. The show ends on saying, oh, and by the way, her body went missing as well. The end. We're going to bow about it now. And I'm like, no, just don't tell us that. If you're not going to be able to deliver that part of the story, because it's too intriguing. That's like a to be continued, but the show does not get continued because this is a musical, it's not a TV series. They're not writing Evita 2, Argentina Never Dies. That's not happening. Anyway, those are my thoughts on this production. Let's talk about the performances. There's lots to say. So in the two leading roles here, we have Martha Kirby as Eva Peron and Tyrone Huntley as Shay. I think they are both doing a tremendous job vocally, and both have developed a strong, immediate characterization of each character. They both have at least one note. And Tyrone does this subtle, underplayed thing very well. It's familiar of what he did with Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar, a role that he's played before. He has this incredible voice where he can throw entire phrases up the octave occasionally. That's thrilling to hear. And he is very well suited as a performer to this particular style of theatre, where the acting choices are played in a more naturalistic way, while we have these high-octane musical moments. It comes across very well on a big high-definition screen. But what I lacked from his Shay was just a little bit of the recklessness and the passion. He gets traditionally increasingly frustrated with her, and I don't think it helped with the direction in that Waltz for Ava and Shay, which is their big confrontation in the second act, like I told you, pivotally important song, it's staged in this sort of a TV studio setup, again, using the cameras. Now, at this point, we're not even in reality. We're in this abstract dream sequence moment, so it's completely unclear what the camera and the screen are meant to be portraying, but it comes across a lot more polite, and it makes this number, written as a dance, it's a waltz, needlessly static. Then we have Martha Kirby, who, again, finds one strong note in Ava. She sounds brilliant, cannot take away from that vocal performance. But what it lacks is the nuance and the depth and this other side to her personality. There are machinations at play here, and there is a cunning behind the eyes, but we just get this sort of resting bitch face, slightly arched eyebrow, authoritative, powerful, manipulative, and I think we lose a little of the sense of what motivates her through all of that. The sense of this girl who didn't have a relationship with her father because they were part of his other illegitimate family. Another reason why the scene between her and the mistress is so important, of someone who beneath her shallow desires has this real drive to uplift and celebrate the working class that she came from. But there isn't a lot of variety to her indignance, to her reaction towards her critics from the military, from the upper classes. We sort of just get this one facial expression and characterization throughout. Gary Milner's Peron I did enjoy. I got a sense of the passion between the two of them. It was interesting how they were directed with this sort of fluctuating power dynamic in their relationship. It never felt quite like they were on equal footing and that they could implicitly trust each other, which I thought was interesting. I thought that was quite compelling. Dan Partridge played Magaldi. I thoroughly enjoyed his characterization. Here it's not a role that you can do an awful lot with, but he then sprints off stage, gets changed and goes back into the ensemble for just about every ensemble number, working very hard on that stage and delivering panache and power with his performance. I thought he was great. But for me, the star turn of the show came from Chumisa Dormford-May, who was playing the mistress and covers the role of Eva Peron. Now, all the mistress really does in this show is sing Another Suitcase in Another Hall. And in the movie, she didn't even do that because Madonna did it. But when I tell you this was a thrilling acting through song performance and the vocal choices made, just about every other time I've heard this song, people will flip into this head voice moment and shy away from the highest notes because it's placed in a very high key to perform in a full belt. I don't expect my love affairs to last for long, so what happens now? It's that note every time, and the last thing I was expecting was for her to lean into the phrase and make that the most powerful note in the melody. So what happens now? The best vocal rendition of that song I think I've ever heard. Sensational work, and I would love to have seen her Eva Peron. But those have been my thoughts about Evita at the Leicester Curve. Because of the aesthetics of this production, because of the bold creative reimagining of it, it does invite comparisons to Jamie Lloyd's Sunset Boulevard. I don't think the same level of care has been taken in all of the details, which is why to me it doesn't really stand up to that other production. But I'm very curious to hear what you thought. So if any of you saw Evita at the Curve, let me know what you thought in the comments section down below. And I hope that you have enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my theatre-themed YouTube channel for many more reviews coming very soon. I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day. For 10 more seconds, I'm MickeyJoTheatre. Oh my god, hey, thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!